What I'm going to do today is to focus on the politics of Narendra Modi vis-à-vis his mother organization, the Sang Parivar, and vis-à-vis the Gujarati political scene at large. Why is it so important to do it? Primarily because Narendra Modi has developed a kind of politics that is atypical among BJP leaders. And I'd like to begin with this. Now, since its inception, the RSS has been conceived as an organization in which individuals have to merge. Organization is above man. And there are many reasons for that. Most probably the founders, the co-founders, so to speak, Edgar and Golwalkar, were well aware of the fact that if the organization was too closely identified with their persons, it will not survive, it may not survive, and they had a long-term agenda. Whatever the reason for this key element of the Sang Parivar, it has resulted in a strong emphasis on the collegiality of the organization. It has never been leader-driven. And that was also true of the BJP. And if you remember well, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee and L.K. Advani were in charge of the party, they alternated in power in a very, I would say, regular or at least systematic manner. The cult of the leader was not there. Well, obviously Narendra Modi is following a different trajectory, a different strategy, and this concentration and personalization of power needs to be explained, and its implications need to be measured. So what I'm going to do today in three different sections is first of all to get back to the complicated relations Narendra Modi has with his mother organization, the Sang Parivar. And then I'll turn to his own personalized style of politics. And last but not least, I'll turn to the content of this politics. Again, not so far as the Hindutva dimension is concerned, but so far as other dimensions are concerned. Well, first of all, what has been the relation of Narendra Modi with his mother organization? Of course, he is from there. He is a Pracharak. He is a full-time cadre, right from his youth time. He joined at a very young age, and he has been a product of the RSS. But he had to leave Gujarat in the mid-90s, and when he returned as chief minister in 2001, the organization was not in his hands anymore. And the BJP, the state BJP of Gujarat, which he had built largely in the 80s, 90s, were in the hands of other people. And primarily in the hands of the outgoing chief minister, Keshubhai Patel, who was, of course, very resentful of the way he had been eased out to make room to Narendra Modi. And there was immediately a kind of tug of war between the party apparatus and the chief minister. It was a very important moment. There was a climax in this conflict in 2006 when Keshubhai Patel himself was candidate to become party president of the Gujarati branch of BJP. And instead of giving him this post, Narendra Modi fielded another candidate, a rival candidate. Something, of course, the old veteran Keshubhai resented a lot, all the more so as he lost and this new man, Rupala, won. Keshubhai Patel went to Delhi and claimed that the elections were not fair, and the BJP High Command had to organize an inquiry to see whether the old man had been beaten fairly. And after 12 days, the conclusion came: Rupala was appointed president without any further explanation. Clearly, Modi had been in a position to twist the arms of party leaders. That was the first, but not the last time. What is more interesting even is that in addition to the factions within the BJP, Narendra Modi has had to face opposition from other major components of the Sang Parivar. And that's also quite exceptional, even more exceptional than factionalism within the party, in fact. Well, two of these major components require a specific attention. One is the VHP and the other one is the Bharatiya Kisan Sangh. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad, the VHP, played a major role in the success of the BJP in the 90s. You all remember, I'm sure, the Ayodhya movement when they organized Rath Yatras and so many other pujas, the Ramshila Puja, for instance, in 1989. Well, the VHP was largely responsible for mobilizing voters in favor of the BJP. So when the BJP took over and became for the first time a party with a majority, a clear-cut majority in Gujarat, the BJP had never been for so long on its own at the helm of a state. The VHP people asked for their own due. They wanted to do Gujarat, to transform Gujarat into a laboratory of Hindutva. And the man who was then, of course, the most prominent VHP leader was Pravin Togaria. Pravin Togaria being of the same age, of the same training of Modi. And a rivalry. And I'd like to quote here Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, who has written a rather balanced, interesting biography of Narendra Modi, and he says, the reasons for the distancing between the two, Togaria and Modi, that happened slowly over the years was due to the fact that in the Hindutva pantheon, there was not enough space for both of them to coexist because both had political ambitions and were youthful. Beyond a point, Modi could not allow Togaria to grow, and the VHP leader would not have played second fiddle to Modi. Hence, a tug of war that resulted in several, I would say, clashes, one of them being the destruction of Hindu temples by the Gujarat government, against, of course, the wish of the VHP. The VHP was absolutely furious to see these demolitions. Another important episode was when Maya Kodnani, a former minister of Narendra Modi, and Babu Bajrangi, Bajrang Dal leader, were sentenced because of their implication in the pogrom. The Gujarat government went one step further and appealed for death sentence. VHP people were absolutely outraged, and they asked Modi to defend their people. The Modi government has renounced to file a criminal appeal seeking death sentence for Maya Kodnani, but not for Babu Bajrangi, showing that the VHP could not have its say. Well, it's even more interesting to look at the bad relations Modi has with the Bharatiya Kisan Sangh. The Bharatiya Kisan Sangh is the largest peasant organization in Gujarat. It's a huge organization. And this organization, again, helped the BJP greatly to win the elections in the mid-90s. When he took over power, Modi decided to implement the Gujarat Electricity Regulatory Commission award that was supposed to result in the a substantial hike of the tariff of electricity for the peasant, to 50% of an increase. Immediately the BKS protested that the peasants were the first casualties of the BJP government that he had just founded, and its leaders attacked Modi head-on. I just quote one of them, Jivanbhai Patel. Of course, most of them are Patels. Modi has triggered an honest nest. He will pay for his act. No. A Sang Parivar leader talking about another Sang Parivar leader. If he has come to power with our support, now he should know we can even push him out of power. He should not undermine our strength. We think our tough stand on the farmers' electricity rate has irked Modi. Lately, it has become impossible to talk to him, quite unlike former Chief Minister Christophe Patel, who was one of them, of course, who always used to give us an audience despite our difference with him. Here you see a very important element. In these differences between different components of the Sang Parivar, the personality of Modi matters a lot. Like the VHP leaders, the BKS leaders turned to the RSS for a compromise. They needed to find a kind of referee to give a kind of award. Nothing of that kind came. Almost no concession were made from Modi, who once again twisted the arms of allies, groups which were supposedly allies. Well, it's an interesting development. It's an unprecedented development to that extent. The RSS is supposed to be in a position to regulate the relations within the Sang Parivar. Here they failed. And they failed even more spectacularly when some of the RSS cadres in the Gujarat state turned against Modi and asked the RSS leaders to ask him to behave. And the man who was more responsible for this was the Pran Pracharak, Manmohan Vaidya, who, as Pran Pracharak, was the key person of the RSS in the state. He was especially upset by one thing that Modi kept doing. Modi never asked the clearance of the RSS when he's giving tickets to BJP candidates. And that's not something BJP leaders are supposed to do. They are supposed to turn to the RSS and submit this list. He never did it, and Manmohan Vaidya was especially upset by that. And the 2007 elections, as a result, led the local RSS leaders to keep some distance. One of them, Mukund Deobankar, most of them come from Maharashtra, of course, declared to the press, this time around, we have not asked our workers, the Swayamsevaks, to get involved in any poll-related work. We have always extended our support for the cause of Hindutva, but we are wedded to an ideology and not to an individual. None of the Sang Parivar organizations have benefited from this government. So state RSS leaders distancing themselves from Modi just before the elections, very important elections in 2007. Well, I would qualify this distanciation, and for one, of course, obvious reason, there has been no break between Modi and the RSS. And there are several explanations for that. One explanation that Vaghela, the Congress leader, gives is that Modi is now so close to the corporate sector that, in fact, he has the money the Sang Parivar needs and the BJP needs to fight elections. It may be one factor. It cannot be the only explanation. Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay has another explanation. He says that, in fact, Modi has galvanized the local militants, activists. And therefore, the intermediary cadres and the top leaders of the RSS cannot do without him. He is the one who can really mobilize the the fighters at the local level. There is last one major explanation. Modi and the RSS are on the same page so far as ideology is concerned. And that's, of course, something I'll return to tomorrow. Well, whatever the reason for the break not to take place, there is no doubt, and I'll end the first section of my presentation on that, that Modi has a much more complicated relationship with the RSS and other Sang Parivar organizations than most of the other chief ministers. You know, look at Chauhan in Madhya Pradesh, you look at all the other chief ministers work hands in hands with the local representatives of the RSS. It's a very important starting point for his, I would say, chief ministership, because that will probably foster his natural inclination to personalize power and to mobilize voters, supporters, while short-circuiting the organization. And that's what I'd like to turn to now. Narendra Modi very quickly has developed a kind of parallel team, parallel pyramid, I would like to say, to have his own followers within the party or at the periphery of the party. Now, to build a pyramid like that, interestingly, is more or less what Indira Gandhi had done in the late 60s, early 70s, when she wanted to emancipate herself from the bosses of the Congress. And that resulted in a break in '69. The Congress of Indira Gandhi broke away from the Congress O. He operated in a very similar way. For instance, making a point to select the candidates for the municipal elections himself, canvassing at the panchayat level. You know, no chief minister canvasses as much as he canvasses for local village elections. But that way, he has a direct line with so many municipal corporators, with so many village panchayat leaders. That's one of the pyramids. That's one of the, I would say, additional team, additional to the Sang Parivar one. There is another thing that Modi has done, and that is to recruit personal aides who do not necessarily come from the Sang Parivar. And he has done that in one particular direction, that is communication, high-tech communication. You have, and I would like to quote Sunil Kilnani, an interesting break with the past way of behaving that we have seen with other BJP chief ministers. Sunil Kilnani says, the real masterminds of Modi's political campaigns are not shadowy figures wearing RSS uniform under their plain clothes. They are smart, cheery, IITians, men like Rajesh Jain. And indeed, Rajesh Jain, a postgraduate from Columbia University, most of them are US educated, is the prototype of this team. Again, very sophisticated, very well trained, US educated, very young. Now, a journalist whom I would not reveal the name was saying that he was absolutely taken aback by the fact that someone like Prashant Kishore, who is just in his 30s, was so influential that even close Modi's aides were directed first to him. That's the core group of young, educated, sometimes high-tech oriented people which have joined Team Modi, so to speak. So it has something to do with the fact that the party and the Sang Parivar were not accommodating enough, but it has something to do also with his own inclination. And his own inclination towards personalization of power and towards image building. I'd like to devote a certain time to this image building exercise. Well, Modi has always been an organizer interested in propaganda. You must remember that he was the one who organized Advani's Rath Yatra in 1990. He was the one who organized Murli Manohar Joshi's Ekta Yatra, from Kanyakumari to Srinagar. So this yatra politics, you know, you crisscross the country with processions, revealed something rather unusual for a Pracharak, who is supposed to be an organization man, a sense of the public, a sense of the public communication. Well, when he became chief minister and was not in a position to rely so much on the Sang Parivar, he went one step further, not only by appointing people like Jain in his team, but also by turning to an American company you may know, APCO Worldwide, who is one of the leading PR firm, who, when he became one of its customers, had already worked for the Nigerian dictator Sani Abacha, the life president of Kazakhstan Nazarbayev, and the former Russian oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky. APCO Worldwide was asked for 2.5 crore rupees a year, I quote, to gauge the tonality of coverage and identify journalists who can further the media ambassadors, who can further be the media ambassadors of Gujarat. Communication to that extent, with the support of a team of professionals. Well, that resulted, or that went on a par with an unleashing of new modes of communication. In the 2007 election, Modi was known to spend 4 hours a day on internet to directly relate to 200 email senders. That was high-tech populism. I return to this ism because we are seeing a new form of direct relationship between the leader and the people. During the same election, he also initiated the sending of thousands of SMS and MMS. That was new at that time. That was 6 years ago. And he also started a channel, a TV channel, that was only devoted to his own campaign. He did the same last year with the Namo channel. And of course, last year was new in the sense that he was able also to show his face in many different places at the same time in 3D, and that was the famous holograms program. It could appear in 26 locations at the same time. That was a kind of show that he held in 132 places for the cost of 150 crores rupees. This is an attempt at saturating the public sphere, communicating the most effective way, at least communicating one image. Well, this idea of the ubiquitous, this idea of the all-pervasive leader was, of course, very well, I would say, epitomized by this innovation that arcs back also to 2007. Supporters of Modi's were wearing his mask for, I would say, multiplying the effect, multiplying the impact. And of course, that's another, I would say, metaphor for populism. The notion of populism has changed over time. We tend to equate, at least in India, populism with demagogy, you know, saying that you give subsidies, you waive loans, and you're a populist. No, the populist is the man who tries to relate directly to each and every citizen, voter, to be the man of the people. And he tries to do that by short-circuiting institutions, parties. The party is nowhere. You will see at the maximum sometimes the party symbol, but that's all. So that's high-tech populism. That's a very important component of the Modi politics. Another very important component is the state of semi-permanent mobilization that is so good at cultivating. There is always something happening in Gujarat. It can be vibrant Gujarat, it can be vibrant Navratri, it can be vibrant Gujarat Global Investor Summit, it can be Jyotigram Power Scheme, it can be Sabhavna Mission, Swarin Mission. Every year there is something happening. Making, of course, front page reports and putting him on stage, and literally on stage. The Sadbhavna mission, for instance, was for more than 1 year based on fasts he was offering for harmony in Gujarat in public. So he was on stage fasting 36 districts, one after another. That's the way also it was publicized. So the messenger is the message in many ways, because it is not saying us anything there. It is just saturating the public space. But of course, we need to go further. And when I say the messenger is the message, I mean that he also tries to say something that's, these were the wrong ones. They have been removed. Huh? I like that one. He says something with his dress code, of course. And he says one thing more often than the rest of the time: I'm a Gujarati. I'm a Gujarati, and I identify with the fellow Gujaratis. Now, this idea that 6 crore Gujaratis are the people he represents is always there. Even though he had never got more than 50% of the votes, he always claims to be the representative of the Gujaratis at large. This image very often goes with a sense of authority. And in that sense, the messenger is the message also, because one day he told Chikargupta, I believe in sarcasm. And sarcasm is exactly the style that conveys authority. You are easily dismissive of the other. You don't even take him seriously. But it's not only that. It's also that he has been able to twist the arms of RSS people, as I have just mentioned. He never budged. He has never said sorry for the pogrom, and he considers that, or at least his supporters consider that Advani made a mistake by saying that the 6th December of '92 was the worst day in his life, because that's a kind of, I would say, acceptation of some fault. Is always strong, and his rallies, when you look at the way it takes place, came to be marked by opt-in references to his 56-inch chest and how it would protect Gujarat. That's body language. That's body language on stage, repeatedly. He also said, I am Hanuman, and 6 crore Gujaratis are my Ram, whom I serve. No, Hanuman is not only has a chest, but he has Ram inside. So we have again a metaphor. So the messenger is the message in that sense. This capacity to be the macho, muscular, at least masculine competitor to the Muslim, of course. That's the unconscious of Gujarat. But who is the most muscular in Gujarat? The Khans, and they have to be contained, and he's there for that. So Gujarati Asmita, this idea of the identity of Gujarat, is very much a constant of his propaganda. So the messenger in that sense has a message. But he has, of course, a much more substantial message. And I will mention, first of all, the anti-center tropism, or even obsession. Narendra Modi speaks against. He spoke against the Muslims, and tomorrow I'll return to that. He speaks against the center also. So you can hear from his speeches a constant anti-center, and sometimes, of course, he equates the fact that he is anti-center to the fact that he is anti-Muslim, because he calls Delhi the Delhi Sultanate. He will never say New Delhi. He will never say the Indian government. He will say the Delhi Sultanate, because the Delhi people, the UPA government, is protecting the minorities. Hence, a phrase, by the way, the Khalistanis had used in the past. But he will also turn against the center for many other reasons. He will, for instance, say, of all the chief ministers that the country has seen in the last 60 years, I have suffered the maximum prejudice at the hands of the center. And to illustrate that, very recently in Rajkot, he told Kisans, we were asking for more water for irrigation in Rajkot. I have met the prime ministers 15 times, asking for the permission to allow installation of gates on Narmada Dam, you know, the famous Narmada river that has now a big dam. However, every time he says, oh really, has it still not been done? When installed, the gates would increase the water storage capacity of the dam by 70%. Incidentally, speeches by Modi are replete with figures. He will give growth rates, he will give so many figures, but that's the way he always, and you have to check the figures, operates. So the center is preventing him from developing Gujarat, and he is especially critical of Manmohan Singh, whom he called Monmohan Singh, you know, because he is supposed to be silent, against about issues like inflation and poverty. So the center, and it's quite a problem, of course, when you want to become a national figure, to be that anti-center. You know, how will you reconvert this afterwards? Well, he is also, of course, the center because Sonia Gandhi is not from India. And that is explicit. What kind of people are these congressmen? They can regard an Italian woman as their own, but they find a son of the soil like me an outsider. You know, it's constant sense of victimization vis-a-vis a cosmopolite center that is not only pro-Muslim, but also in the hands of an Italian woman. So that's a very important element of the rhetoric. I would like to focus on another one, more positive. When you look at the speeches, but also the policies, you see that the Modi government has devoted quite a lot of its energy to the urban part of Gujarat. And for me, it's a very important decision that they have made. In 2009, he declared at the conference of the chief ministers and chief justices of high courts that there are no villages in Gujarat. And that was not by mistake. It was really reflecting a special focus on urban Gujarat. And this is also something reflected in his notion of rurbanization. Rurbanization is a word that has emerged at the same time, 2009, and that has resulted in the Urban General Development Control Regulation, which is intended to bridge the gap between villages and cities or towns in order to get rid of the village, get rid of this part of society that is rural. Well, this plan went on to an effort to improve the quality of life of the urban middle class, because the plan was mostly intended to stop migrations and the inflow of villagers to the cities. So behind the urban motto, there is this interest in better cities. And here you see clearly that the goal is the urban middle class and neo-middle class. I'll return to this neologism. Well, in 2006 already, the government of Gujarat had reformed the regulations for residential townships in order to enable the middle class section of the state cities to grow. The new regulations allowed real estate developers to build multi-story buildings 70 meters high with floor space index of 1.5, which is an important dimension, irrespective of any zone in any urban area of Gujarat. The developer will have to set aside 60% of land for residential purpose, while the rest can be put to use for public purposes, public infrastructures, including 30-meter wide roads, streets, recreational grounds, water and electricity supply, street lighting, sewerage, and storm water drainage. 5% of the space will have to be left for school, hospital, and public amenities, 5% for the public, and 5% for the weaker sections. 5% for the weaker sections when the slums of Gujarati cities represent 18% of the existing cities. Here you have an interesting roadmap. And for making this roadmap possible, the builders can acquire government land occupied by slums and build houses for slum dwellers. But it can also choose to rehabilitate the slum dwellers out of the city. If everything goes as planned, and I quote, slum pockets in Ahmedabad may soon be transformed into decent residential localities. So here you have an interesting, I would say, reflection or image of, I would say, the fatigue with the poor that the middle class of India is feeling so strongly. And this is typically the kind of sentiment Narendra Modi is building upon. Interestingly, recently the CAG has told him that he has not implemented the poor-oriented sections of the plan designed by the union government under the name of the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. He has spent 70% of the money for the 72 housing projects which had been sanctioned. So the money that was there for the poor neighborhoods, including slums, have not been spent, but developers are welcome to rehabilitate them elsewhere. So here we have a clear indication of the target that the middle class represents. And I'd like to end rather in detail on this. When we look at the ideology of Narendra Modi, the message, in addition to all what I have said, and in addition to Hindutva, we have a class element. There is a clear class element in it. But it's more complicated than what we would think spontaneously sometimes. He doesn't want to attract the middle class only, but what he calls the neo-middle class. And the neo-middle class is a phrase he coined for the last elections, and that appears in the BJP manifesto. The manifesto says, due to development in Gujarat in the last 10 years, there has been substantial rise in this neo-middle class. We want to address their issues. We will form a committee to define this neo-middle class. We will try to give them benefits of government schemes. So it's like the OBCs in 1949. No? We don't know who they are, but we will find out and we will do something for them. What is important is, of course, it will click this idea that beyond the middle class, there is a group that has to be brought on board. Well, if you look at the, I missed that one. When you look at the figures that the NSS have provided recently, you see that the gap between rural Gujarat and urban Gujarat has widened. No, that's something you see in bold characters. You have Gujarat. The percentage of Gujaratis living below the poverty line in the village and in towns and cities is larger than in most of the other states. 11.5%. That's the 11 percentage points. It makes Gujarat number 13. It's behind Andhra, Bihar, of course, Karnataka, Kerala. It's just ahead of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra because Bombay is so big that the gap is huge. It's an interesting indication. Development in Gujarat is primarily development in urban Gujarat. And the percentage of poor continues to increase, at least in relative terms, in the village. And when you look at who are these villagers who are so poor, of course you end up with scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, and OBCs. 4.8 non-ST, non-SC, non-OBC poor means that there is no poor left among the dominant caste. It is an amazing achievement. So if we refine the figures and look at not only where are the poor in the village, but who are there, those who are in the village, SC, ST, and OBCs. Now, when we try to see who votes for Narendra Modi, who votes for the BJP, we have a class dimension that is striking. That was 2007. The poorer you were, the more Congress-oriented you were. The richer you were, the more BJP-oriented you were. And it was still there in the last elections, even though there was one more player, Keshubhai Patel's party, the GPP. See, the BJP has a linear relation. So it works. Middle class people, the winners of development, support the BJP. But it works more than that. It works also because low caste people are now turning to the BJP the moment they migrate to towns and cities. Low caste people are these Kshatriyas, Kolis, and the other OBCs. These are OBCs. They used to vote more for the Congress. And this group is huge. This is the main OBC caste group in Gujarat, 1/4 of society. It used to be behind the Congress. It is now behind the BJP. But it's not behind the BJP when it lives in the village. It is behind the BJP when it has migrated to the city. And that's what this CSDS figure shows. In rural Gujarat, the Congress is still #1. Now, if Gujarat was rural, the Congress would be in power. This is the only category where the Congress is ahead of the BJP. But in semi-urban constituencies, they are lagging behind like anything. And why? Because these big OBC castes, groups, when they leave the village, they leave the Congress. The coolies are really a case in point. What's happening there? Well, these are aspiring people. No, they leave the village to get a job in a factory. And he's precisely the one who has got Tata, Maruti, and so many others to give jobs. So you get the job and you vote Modi, if I may put it in a nutshell. These are aspiring groups who are telling us something very important. In addition to the caste-based political identity, you have now something like the class-based political identity, because this is a class vote. Irrespective of caste, you have a class element there. And it's true for the coolies. It's a little less true for the Kshatriyas, but still. Can you imagine the Kshatriyas, which were the group Solanki, Madhav Singh Solanki, mobilized in office in the 80s, they are now massively behind Narendra Modi. And the only, I would say, important Congress leader in Gujarat, Shankar Singh Waghela, is a Kshatriya who is not even now able to get a majority of the voters behind him. So here we have an interesting political economy and a shift from caste identity to class identity. So I will wrap up in a minute to make 3 bullet points. If we try to recap the politics of Narendra Modi over the last 12 years, in addition to the Hindutva dimension that I have skipped, you have a man who has no party, if I put it bluntly, and that has to make up for this liability, who will build his own pyramid and team and relate to the voters directly with new modes of communication. And you have a man whose message, whose policy is largely directed towards established and aspiring groups. Both combination give him power, and gave him power at least over the last 2 elections. Now, I would end with 2 caveats. The first one is these aspiring groups may be frustrated in the end, because jobs are not that many. The kind of growth India has at large and the kind of growth Gujarat has in particular is not creating many jobs. And we will have a big, I think, he will have maybe a problem there. And if we turn to the national scene, because of course, as Isabel was telling us, we are now looking at not only Gujarat but India. I would say the question for me is India urbanized enough for voting Narendra Modi to power? Because if you explain the success of Narendra Modi by urbanization and the urban political culture that you find in Gujarat, here you have a disconnect. Gujarat is massively urbanized. It is the most urbanized state of that category. 43% almost of people living in towns and cities. India is not that urbanized. The villagers will decide once again. So the number of urban constituencies is very, very small still, in spite of the reconfiguration of the constituencies. So for me, the most important thing to see in the coming elections is there something like a class vote, a middle class or middle class vote that is confined to the towns and cities. They will massively support Modi for sure. But what about the others? What about the groups which are not yet in the same mindset, in the same mode? So I will not give any prediction. I will give a question only. And that's the end of my talk.
very interesting point. I just have a question about the breakdown of the caste groups on this particular chart.
Yes.
And in the context of Gujarat, actually, the category of the Kshatriya needs to be disaggregated.
Yeah.
Large numbers of them, including Sang Parivar's own caste, are actually classified as OBCs.
Yes.
And some of them have switched to the Congress in terms of their allegiances.
Yeah.
But what explains the success of the BJP is not so much class identity, as much as the fact that they have been very successful in transforming the party structure itself into a predominantly non-upper caste mobilization in Gujarat. That's something that needs to be accounted for. So even though he doesn't depend on the party, the discourse of Hindu nationalism appeals to these caste groups because of the work that have been done in the previous 2 decades. Okay, that's one thing.
Yeah, well, on this thing, it's an important point. Indeed, you have to factor in the Hindutva discourse, and I missed that deliberately. On the composition of the party, I'm tabulating these days the breakup of the MLAs caste-wise. You know, Patels remain very, very strong. And I find really fascinating that the Patels, who were the rivals of the Kshatriyas and the OBCs at large, are now joining hands with them. And that's why I say beyond caste, something is happening. Yeah.
The question right here.
Hey, thank you. That was very interesting. I was wondering if you could contextualize a little bit the rise of someone like Narendra Modi in the context of the increasing trend of chief ministers in India to be re-elected and to consolidate power over 2 or 3 administrations. So you have Sheila Dikshit, you have Tarun Gogoi, even on the BJP you have Shivraj Singh Chauhan, Raman Singh, etc.
Nitish Kumar.
Nitish Kumar, exactly. Naveen Patnaik. So there are all these cases where now people are basically fairly assured of returning to office and developing a sort of base within the state. And as a result, states are also becoming politically stronger. Do you think that contributes to this sense of this illusion that they might then be able to run the country if they are nominated? Because the only difference between Narendra Modi in that sense is that he is being projected as a prime ministerial candidate. If the Congress was not dynastic, they might very well have projected Tarun Gogoi as someone who was very capable of turning around the Assam administration, fixing all the problems, addressing insurgency, and then say that he can also run the country because of these reasons. So is it then that exceptional that Narendra Modi has sort of emerged in this climate?
Well, no, indeed, Nitish Kumar may think about it too, for instance. Now, the idea that there may be an illusion there, you know, the illusion that a chief minister can become prime minister. It's an interesting point because so far, to my knowledge, no chief minister has become prime minister. See what I mean? Yeah, you are identified with the state, and he's so much identified with Gujarat that to transcend this is quite a task. And it's much easier when you come from the top because you're not identified with any of the regions of the country. So yes, that's one. But I relate that to my previous point. Is there something like a national middle class that looks at him as one of them, irrespective of his Gujarati identity? You see what I mean? Can he epitomize this new accountability-oriented Indian voter who does not care for identity politics, but who cares for the bottom line? And the next elections will be on that. He will have this one-point agenda, development for all, and that may be interesting to see how far it can go. Yeah.
Jonathan has a question.
Sorry.
I really enjoyed the talk. Thanks very much. Given your emphasis on the kind of public relations professionalism, I wonder if your analysis of the people who are moving from rural to urban or semi-urban contexts is appropriately called a shift in class, because it seems like it's more of a shift in aspirations and especially since you have this sort of critique of the Delhi Sultanate, the critique of the central power of not allowing us to develop properly. You don't actually need the development itself and the successful arrival into the middle class to be satisfied in order for the rhetoric of this sort of image to work.
Yeah. No, that's an important point, and that's why I mentioned frustrations probably around the corner. Well, indeed, they have aspirations which are somewhat fulfilled. That's where the glass is empty, half empty more than half full more than half empty. There is something taking place. They have very low wages. Gujarat has the lowest wages in the whole of India. But they have a job. And now it's only a kind of, yes, aspiration that needs to be consolidated. And that's why frustrations may be around the corner. But they have that. Your reference to the communication movement is important because indeed it's a class not only because of occupation, it's a class because of the environment, you know, and I think the middle class cannot be defined the Marxist way or even the Weberian way. Well, at least from Weber we can bring some of the main criteria. The environment, I would say the communication kind of environment matters a lot, and you're much more exposed to the kind of images I have shown when you are in a town or a city than when you are in a village, of course. And your consumption patterns vary also. So class is defined by these things. Yeah.
There are two questions over there. Before I get to you two over there, Morali, you had a question. And is there a young person in the room that would like to ask a question after Morali? This will be your chance, so go on first.
Could you kindly explain the affinity of like Rajesh or Prashant towards Modi? Is this some kind of symbiotic relationship? Or?
It's a mystery for me. Even more so because, as I will say tomorrow, if I have the time, we have just discovered that the website gujaratriots.com was also something Rajesh Jain did. And do surf on that website. You'll be surprised. So you have a real interrogation. How smart, educated people can indeed go that far? For me, it's a mystery, except that when you scratch a bit, sometimes you find someone else. That's the only explanation I find.
The question over there.
Thank you so much for your lecture. This question is more along the lines of the talk that you're going to give tomorrow. But I was wondering how you sort of explain this phenomenon of more and more Muslims voting for the BJP in Gujarat. I think in the last election it was somewhere near 31%. No.
Again, a problem with figures. but you have excuses because these figures have been, the figures were very interesting. In fact, there was a drop by 1 percentage points from 22 to 21. 1/5 of the Muslims of Gujarat vote for the BJP, not 1/3. No way. Sorry, but that was your only question, or that was the preliminary?
That was the preliminary.
Yes, yes.
So if the premise is wrong, then that question.
Go ahead. No, 20% is still a lot. So what's the question?
So my question was, how do you sort of explain that sort of percentage of Muslims voting for Narendra Modi if you're positioning him as the anti-Muslim muscular figure?
There are many different explanations that you hear from the field. The first one is there is a real difference among the Muslims between the Bohras and the rest. And Bohras are a specific subgroup which have always been close to the BJP, a bit like the Shias in Lucknow. Huh? And they are rewarded for that. Secondly, you have the usual patronage politics. You know, at the local level, your MLA, whatever his party is, if he really delivers, you will not care that much. And third, last but not least, and he can deliver because there is growth, and the growth is because of Modi, blah, blah, blah. And third, but last but not least, I've also heard that it's better to have him in office than to have him out of office. And that's something we must think about. Yeah. You had, there was a...
Yeah, question there, yeah.
Related, so, something that the BJP has discussed pretty extensively is the lack of performance on the part of the Congress government, that, there have been scams, governance hasn't been good. In fact, part of the reason why the General Lokpal movement came up was that people thought there's this vacuum in the government that, people are opportunistically trying to fill.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Congress often responds by saying that, we can't have somebody in power who's going to be a huge threat to, say, 27 or 30% of the population of the country, which are Muslims. But then,
They are 14, huh?
Sorry?
They are 14.
Yes, sorry, 14%. But now, if you, by this argument that, the middle class might come out and vote for Modi, it would seem that the middle class is then, Modi's sort of communalist image, or whatever it may be, is not that important for the middle class as is the governance benefits that they perceive. Or they believe that, the communalist image is not an issue, or it's overplayed by the Congress because they don't have anything else to say.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. But I want to clarify quickly is the clean image thing, Yes, he is, of course, attacking the Congress for good reasons, because of corruption. And this government has sealed its fate by being corrupt. But look at the MLAs, MPs, ministers of the BJP in Gujarat. And that's chapter 4 of my book, my forthcoming book, one full chapter on this, Nobody speaks about that. It is a record number of ministers with very, very serious charges against them. No state in India has so many former ministers, policemen, because of fake encounters primarily, behind the bars. And the mystery for me here is on the Congress side. Why don't they highlight that? And of course, on the top of it, what does the media do? Where are the profiles?
Two more questions, two last questions. You go first. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. So let me get straight to the real question I have in mind for a while now. Is Modi a politician or a movement?
Yeah.
Because if he's a politician, he's trying to be the prime minister, as we have discussed. But I don't think he'll get there, because even if he secures 199, he still has to bring in other parties, and there may be a problem. So if he's a movement, is he trying to be the president so that he's unshackled by all the limitations of being the prime minister and become the movement of I'm proud to be a Hindu? So because all those billboards have gone all over Gujarat, so so I look at Modi as movement and not as a politician. Politician may be just a stepping stone for him. Now, that said, where all of these little pieces are coming in, because he is urban class and this and that, he's, this new thing that he did with the statue of Sardar Patel, and having the beauty of the line in there was have all these villages all over India participate by 1.5 grams of instruments that they're not using anymore, etc. I mean, that was perfect. And I give brilliance, kudos to the person who came up with that idea, maybe him, maybe somebody else around him, which actually takes me to the next question quickly. The team that you mentioned, the IT team with him, are these ideologues or are they professionals? I mean, which way they go? And those are my questions.
And these are many questions. On the idea of the iron statue, the idea comes from the 1983 Ekatmata Yatra, when water from each river of India were merged together to show how united the country is. So it's a kind of repeat of that, remake. He doesn't look at himself as a politician. And I think it's one of the explanations of this capacity not to budge. And in that sense, he has something of a Pracharak left in him, very much so. At the same time, to be a movement would mean that you expand beyond this group. Or it is a remake of the Ana Hazare movement. In fact, it is tapping from that movement for sure. But is it going beyond that? For that, you need to be able to, adjust. Why has the Congress been so good for so long? Because it takes different colors in different places. Regional places, but also, I would say, mental locations. And maybe its main, I would say, liability. Is it flexible enough for not only leading a movement, but capitalizing on latent forces? When you look at the way Mahatma Gandhi became a movement, he became a movement by capturing all the latent resentments which were there. The beautiful article on the making of the Mahatma shows that. So can he not only come from the top, but also capitalize on what is going on the ground? That is a, for me, it's not clear. And I would not see him handling a coalition of 15 parties, really.
We have one final question. Please make it short, because we have to leave the room.
So what would a Modi-run India foreign policy be like in terms of the contradiction that you have between an aspiring India and a kind of Pakistan and Muslim baiting India? And you think, what would it mean for the region?
I mentioned the fact that he needed to be against something. He is developing a campaign to be national that is very much against Pakistan. And it makes sense. If you need another, it is the most likely one. How do you reconcile this with a foreign policy that is not too aggressive when you take over? If he takes over 6 months before the withdrawal of the NATO forces from Afghanistan, what will he do? Would he continue with the very cautious policy of New Delhi, or will he invest in Afghanistan at the cost of an alienation of Pakistan? That's a very serious issue. So, given his past records, I would not be very confident so far as accommodation, engaging are concerned. Yeah.
Thank you very much.